You are Locked On Wolves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Oh, brother. T-Wolves still looking for answers on how to stop this OKC juggernaut. They go down 2-0, 103-118. That's your final tonight. What's going on, though? Back in the lab, back at it. Another T-Wolves POSTCAST episode right here on the Locked On Sports Minnesota Network. Your team every day. Jack Borman with me, as always. Give him a follow at JRBorman13. Jack, I asked you this after game one. I'm pretty sure. Now you got a 2-game sample, though. Was this a bad game or a bad sign the Wolves just don't match up well enough to beat this OKC team, 4 times in 7 games? What's your knee-jerk reaction right now, 5 minutes after the game?
Yeah, I mean, they look completely outclassed right now, and there's not really any way to sugarcoat it. I mean, we're now going on the second straight postseason where they've been overly reliant on a 37-year-old point guard, and just expecting him to hold up and play super heavy minutes at this stage of a season against a team that flies around defensively as much as Oklahoma City. It is just unsustainable and not something that you can bank on moving forward. I mean, Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Donte DiVincenzo both had a really promising first quarter in the way that they were playing, both as shooters and ball handlers in that first quarter. But I mean, Donte DiVincenzo was awful in this game. He tied for the team lead in turnovers, played just 22 minutes, was benched for the fourth quarter as a game worst, minus 27. But yeah, I mean, the Timberwolves with Mike Conley on the floor so far in this series are plus 19 in 50 minutes that he's played, and have an offensive rating. Tonight they had an offensive rating of 132 when Mike was on the court, and they won 74-60 in those 28 minutes. Game one, they had a 112 offensive rating, 155-50 in his 23 minutes. And then when he was off the floor tonight, they lost 58-29. They had a 72 offensive rating. And then in game one, they lost the minutes that he was off the court by 31 with a 70 offensive rating. Like, those are significant stretches of just god-awful offense.
Those are crazy numbers, Jack. I'm glad you pointed them out.
Who are you
blaming?
I mean, on a certain level, you can blame some shooting. I think if Timberwolves make some open shots, certainly those numbers aren't quite as bad, but they're also missing open shots when Conley's on the floor, and those numbers are what they are. So I think it's just been Donte and Nickeil's complete inability to handle pressure up top has been the number one item for me. And we talked about that in Golden State. I remember game 3 last series. Those two guys were awful. And in stretches of game 4, they were both really bad, handling the heavy ball pressure that Golden State showed, pretty much picking up full court a decent amount. And then especially once guys crossed half court. And we kind of talked about that coming into this series, that was something that they were going to have to clean up, and they have not cleaned it up. I mean, just for the Timberwolves, they've given up 53 points off of 31 turnovers. That's 1.7 points per turnover. That is a sky high number. And this Oklahoma City team is the best in the league at turning teams over and scoring off those turnovers. And they're the best in the league at not turning it over and not letting their opponent score on turnovers. So the fact that they're not taking care of the things that, you came in knowing that Oklahoma City is going to want to try to do well is pretty daunting to look at here as the Wolves go down 2-0. And I just feel like there's not a whole lot of hope based on what we've seen on the court thus far through 2 games, especially considering that this team quit for the second night in a row in the third quarter. They just completely let go of the rope. And we talked about how, Julius Randle was rolling in the first half of game 1, then came out and only shot 1 field goal attempt in that third quarter. Anthony Edwards was way more aggressive in the first half, took 18 shots in the first half after taking just 13 in all of game 1, and then takes 1 field goal attempt in the first 9 minutes of the third quarter. And just the way that this Timberwolves team has just stopped playing and given up and completely lost all of their focus and attention to game plan details, all that good stuff at a huge pivotal point in the game where they've let their emotions get the best of them, kind of coinciding with all of that. It's disappointing to see, considering that, outside the bounds of those moments when they've given up for 4 or 5 minutes, they've been right there on the scoreboard. So I think
Yeah.
that's what kind of adds to some of the frustration, is that you can kind of see the car crash happening in slow motion on the TV. But for the Wolves, they just haven't been able to kind of steady themselves the same way that they did against the Lakers and the Warriors in the first two rounds when things kind of started to get off the rails.
Yeah, well said there. Good breakdown for sure. A lot of frustration that we'll dive into. A lot of throw your TV through the throw your remote through the TV moments there. Biggest turning point I want to touch on for the Wolves, just where everything kind of went south. Plus, we should do a little deep dive on game 3 as well. Again, talk about it, what adjustments need to be made, and need to be made in a hurry too. Game 3 Saturday night, 7:30 tip. But first, quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to us by Monarch Money. Monarch Money, take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. I'm not going to do the whole recap like I usually do. Again, T-Wolves dig themselves in a 2-0 hole. They get to head back to Target Center Saturday night, 103-118. That's your final. Julius Randle and Rudy Gobert, just absolute shells of themselves, which, I know you'll touch on. Ant did a lot more tonight, as you mentioned, team high 32, but still 1 of 9 from 3 tonight. The bench was better, but they still sit here tonight looking for answers on how to just crack this OKC cheat code that right now feels like such an impossible ask. Big picture, again, felt like a better performance from game 1, top to bottom, although not sure it could be any worse than game 1, right? But you do get to come home back, right, for 2 more. You got a chance to tie this thing back up at the Target Center, make it a 3-game series. But clearly needs to be a lot of adjustments made in a very short amount of time, a very short time frame, if you're going to get that done. And again, just figure out how to stop this OKC juggernaut.
Yeah, I think, what's frustrating is that they've looked totally competent for 22 minutes in both of these games, especially in the offensive end of the floor. I really liked what they did tonight in the early parts of the game. I mean, if you want to get into just some of the adjustments that the Wolves made off the top, I mean, Ant obviously was way more aggressive, but I like the way that they tried to get him the ball, in that they had him posting up Cason Wallace, who's a smaller, he's an incredibly agile, super aggressive, physical, on-ball defender. But when you get in the post, you just kind of take away some of that agility, and it just becomes more raw strength. It's easier for Ant to see some of those doubles and kick the ball to the opposite side of the floor, because Oklahoma City really loads up. The guys on the backside of the defense are both in the paint. They're not outside the paint. So Ant's good at making those kind of jump skip passes, and that created some open looks early in the game. And then I thought while Ant and Randall, to a certain extent, were posting up on the strong side, Jaden McDaniels, Dante DiVincenzo did a good job of, Mike Conley too, did a good job of cutting from the opposite slot to kind of break down that back half of the defense, and then having the guy who's in the corner kind of rise up out of the corner, or just setting a hammer screen. So Ant's got the ball on the opposite block. There's 2 guys on the weak side of the floor, one setting that screen kind of facing Ant away from the guy in the corner he's screening for, to create that open corner 3-point shot. And the Wolves just didn't make enough of those. Again, Wolves did a pretty darn good job of generating corner threes in this game. They got 15 of them up after getting up, I think, 21 in game 1. They started out 4 of 8 in the first half, and then they went 0 of 7 in the second half. So 4 of 15. You add all that up for the entire series, Luke, and they are, what do I have here? They are 9 of 36, 25% through 2 games. And this Timberwolves team shot over 40% on corner threes in the regular season, and they shot, I believe, 37% coming into this series in the first 2 rounds. So just for them to have that kind of fall off a cliff has been really tough. But you got to give Ant some credit in the way that he was able to find other ways to get into the rim. I thought that he was much quicker and going off the catch once he caught the ball, trying to explode kind of through the defense before they can load up and bring that second guy in the gap, which was nice just to see him even get a look at the rim inside, which was not something we saw a lot of in game 1. Mm-hmm. So that certainly was really helpful for him. And I think there's definitely some things that you can build off of there, while also mixing in a lot more of the screening while he's off the ball to come have him kind of get the ball on the move. I think they could do more of that, especially when Oklahoma City's playing in man and trying to force some switches there. But the other big adjustment that the Wolves made was defensively. They played a lot more of 2-3 zone. And 2-1-2 zone too. So they played 2-3 early on after playing just 2 possessions of zone in game 1. But Oklahoma City put Alex Caruso in the middle of that zone, like the Wolves have often put Julius Randle or Naz Reid in the middle of those zones. He scored a couple times in that second quarter, and then Chet Holmgren also scored early in that third quarter when the Timberwolves went to zone out of halftime. And so then Chris Finch decided to go to more of a 2-1-2 zone where Jaden McDaniels was in the middle to try to take some of that away, which I thought was a good move if they're going to continue to play that zone. But the Wolves also struggled to rebound while they were in that zone, which is sometimes something that can happen with not playing man to man. It's kind of hard to keep an eye on where those rebounders are going to be flying in from. So that was certainly something that bit the Wolves. And then the last one was just for OKC. I thought that OKC did a great job of playing through Chet Holmgren, especially very early on of this game. And then Jalen Williams really got into it as well, getting cooking in the mid-range. And it was really just, all of the Thunder were knocking down mid-range shots at a pretty impressive clip. I mean, the Wolves were just playing standard drop with Rudy Gobert, which is great against teams that are not really good mid-range jump shooting teams, but considering this Oklahoma City Thunder team has 2 of the best guys in the league going right now, in SGA and Jalen Williams from the mid-range. I mean, Oklahoma City shot 14 of 19 in the mid-range, like 74%. And then in the second half, just 6 of 16, which is 37.5%, which is right around league average. And so for the Thunder to be doubling up what the league averages from the mid-range on high volume, it is just tough. And the Wolves just didn't adjust and bring kind of the requisite aggressiveness and physicality that we saw on the other end of the floor from Oklahoma City. So I think, kind of all those things we saw play out differently tonight than we did in game 1, but the result was fairly similar. And I think the Wolves' just inability to control their frustrations. And I'm not saying the frustrations are not warranted. Because
it's tough.
You and I are feeling some of the same frustrations. I'm sure everybody in the chat is. And that's just kind of the nature of how things go. But you just can't let it dissuade you from competing. And I think that's what's happened in each of these first 2 games. And as big of a key as it's been for the Timberwolves, the fact that they still haven't been able to keep their composure has just been pretty frustrating because it's precluded them from having a chance right at the end of these games.
Well said there. Good breakdown. Plenty more deep dive for this one. Biggest turning point in this one where everything just fell apart and went south. That's all coming up right after this. Quick reminder, today's episode brought to us by Monarch Money. You ever go check your bank account and wonder, where did my money go? Dining out, online shopping, entertainment, so easy to lose track. Well, that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your own personal CFO, Monarch Money gives you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, spending, all in one place. So you stop just managing your money and instead you start building some wealth. I know when I started using Monarch Money, I realized how much I was spending every month on streaming services, right? We all do it. Max, Netflix, Apple TV, Disney, Hulu, you name it, I had it. But now I budget smarter. I save more than ever. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your entire first year. If I were to tell you, I want to get in the turning point, but just real quick, I just got to say this. If I were to tell you after what you saw in game 1, right? Think about what you saw in game 1, that in game 2, Rudy, Julius, and Mike Conley would come out and score 14 points combined, you would have just thought to yourself, what?
It's a wrap.
What happened?
You just have no chance of winning.
It's like that Paul Rudd gif. Like, what happened here while I was away? What's going on?
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
how?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, let's start with Rudy Gobert,
Sure.
because I think that he's been, I think is the most pivotal issue, I think, for the Timberwolves. Rudy, I just wrote down that he was slower, softer, weaker inside, and straight up less impactful than both of Oklahoma City's big men. And I've been overwhelmingly positive, supporting of Gobert all year long, even when he struggled in the first 2 series because of the way that he just kept competing, and his moments came at important times in those series. But so far, he's been just a wash for the Wolves, just in the sense that he hasn't really made his impact on the game in a meaningful way through the first 2 games. And I think that he, like I said, he's been slower to a lot of rebounds. Holmgren and Hartenstein have been more explosive. They've been more physical. They've been stronger. They've been quicker to 50-50 balls. Rudy keeps trying to go for rebounds with one hand while keeping his second arm just hooked on guys instead of trying to go up and grab the ball with 2 hands. And that was something that we've seen in the early part of the playoffs, but is really becoming more of a factor now for playing a team that has a legitimate center for the first time. And Oklahoma City has 2 of them. And so he's got to be a lot better and more physical on the inside. I mean, we really only saw one very small spurt of him looking engaged on the offensive end of the floor, and that was when he had those 2 offensive rebounds for 3 second chance points in the opening minutes of that third quarter. But it was just nothing outside of that. And I think, again, it doesn't really matter whether Gobert's on the floor or off the floor in terms of how effective Oklahoma City's been in the mid-range. Like, Oklahoma City shot 67%, 10 of 15 from 2, just as a whole, with Gobert off the floor tonight. And on the floor, they shot 63%, 24 of 38 from 2 in those minutes. So I think if Rudy Gobert is not even going to be able to help shut a team's water off from 2 while he's out there, and being a complete nothing on offense too, then I just think that you're not going to be able to play him. And at this point, I think there's going to be some harder conversations that'll have to be had in the offseason just about that as a whole. I think he's been phenomenal for the most part while he's been here, but it's just the second playoffs in a row where he's, the offense just the offense really needs him to not be out there to find success and find some more spacing. And then, the things that he's really supposed to be doing better than almost anybody else in the league, he's not even doing the best on his own team. And that's when it becomes a major problem. And that's what we saw tonight. I mean, 9 rebounds is better than what they got in game 1. He wasn't in foul trouble, which is obviously a good thing. And look, I still think Rudy should play on some level. I still think there's lineups and situations that make sense for him to play, but he's just got to be a lot more impactful than he's been thus far in this series. And then with Randall, right, 28 points in game 1, 9 of 13 shooting. Randall only had 1 assist in game 1, but he had 10 potential assists, meaning had the shot gone in, it would have been an assist. So I think a lot of that had to do with just his teammates missing shots. But in this game was completely invisible. I mean, early on in this game was just kind of all sorts of chaotic energy, and not in a good way. Missed 3 straight shots at the rim after getting 3 offensive rebounds, 2 or 3 offensive rebounds on 1 possession. Those accounted for 2 or 3 of his 5 overall total rebounds in 32 minutes, which is unacceptable. And for him to also then have 4 turnovers, I think was pretty problematic as well. And I just think we haven't gotten a game like this from Julius Randle in months, and that's a great testament to Randle and how tremendous he's been. And I think if there's one of these games that happens over the course of a playoff run, I think this is what now the 12th game of the Timberwolves playoffs for him to only have 1 stinker out of 12 games. I think you definitely take that, but just came at an unfortunate time and in an unfortunate way. And the Timberwolves certainly need more from those 2 guys, but Randle especially on the offensive end, just considering the way that Oklahoma City's main 3 guys scored with such ease and efficiency tonight. You just can't really afford for one of your 2 main scorers to have an off night. And the last thing that I'll touch on here before we can move on is I just think as a result of that, Jaden McDaniels needs the ball more. I think he's shown consistently that when he's got the ball in his hands, he can make good things happen as a scorer, especially with smaller and slighter of build guys guarding him. Like he had a SGA on him a lot. And I think SGA or Cason Wallace, guys that are a lot smaller than him, that he's able to kind of go up and finish over. And I think that's something that the Wolves really need to tap into more, because he looked very confident as a scorer tonight. And I think anything the Wolves can do to extract more offense and easy, or I guess easier situations for them would be huge, and just relieve some pressure from not only Ant but also Randall. And I think McDaniels is naturally that guy to step up, and he's shown that he's capable of it last year and this year. And I think the Timberwolves desperately need more of that, combined with, obviously this bench crew needing to figure it out, because Naz Reid is 0 of 12 from 3 through 2 games after shooting 46% in the first 2 rounds, and looks to be kind of seeing some ghosts out there as a shooter. So yeah, it's just all hands on deck, and Jaden McDaniels, I think, has the surest hands beyond Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle at this point.
Yeah, well said there.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
So biggest turning point in this one, when was it and why? Like, when did things go just too far south for them to overcome? Or when you felt that just kind of one back-breaking sequence or couple plays, or even just one specific play for that matter?
Yeah, I think it started at the end of the first half. The Timberwolves in game 1, the end of the first half, they allowed Oklahoma City to go on a 4-0 run in the last 24 seconds. And they went from up 8 to only up 4 going into the locker room, and just kind of gave Oklahoma City some life going, and some momentum going into the locker room. And then the same thing happened tonight, only the Timberwolves went from being down 3 to down 8, right? Shea hits a crazy shot that was very well guarded by Jaden McDaniels. You just got to shake his hand and move on. And then Dante DiVincenzo sets a screen that was called illegally. Was it an illegal screen? Yes. Would you like to see more of those called on the other end? Absolutely. But just a bad time for him to set one of those. And then Shea gets fouled right at the end and makes both free throws. So, and then, Oklahoma City comes out and scores the first few points of the second half. And so when you compound those issues, and then come out of the locker room without the energy that you need to really chip into it really quickly and retake a lead, I think that those types of sequences just become magnified. And so having a moment like that in each of those first 2 games on the road against a team where your margin for error is pretty thin, just considering how high their floor is because of their defense. You just can't afford too many of those moments. And I think the Wolves, we've seen it at different times throughout this entire year. Didn't really bite them all that much in game or in the first 2 series, but again, it's really showing in this third series in the Western Conference Finals. So you just got to do everything in your power to pay attention to all the little details and put together a complete 24-minute half, rather than let your opponent off the hook and get some momentum going into halftime, when you really have controlled the game what feels like for the majority of these 2 first halves.
There's a lot to rip on. There's a lot to chew into. I mean, again, these last 2 games have been super frustrating to watch, but has there been 1 or 2 adjustments you saw from game 1 to game 2 for the Wolves? Is there anything that gives you a little bit of hope that these guys still got some life or fight, or can crack this, again, OKC kind of cheat code? Find me a positive here, and then we'll move on to the game 3 preview.
Yeah, I think just as a whole, getting 5 threes from and Dante was obviously a step in the right direction. Those guys shot 5 of 10 from 3. I mean, you're going to need those guys to be contributors in the next, really the rest of the series. So for those guys to at least start to see some shots go down and come home, where those guys have largely been much better over the course of this season, I think that's something that you can kind of hang your hat on. I also think that you can hang your hat on finding more ways to get Anthony Edwards in the paint in this game, which was more important. Ant made 11 twos in this game. So if he can find the rhythm from outside and add on to, shooting 11 of 17 from 2, which is pretty good for Ant, considering how much traffic he was going up against in there. I think that would certainly help. And then, I guess another positive for the Wolves, they've continually found ways to crash the offensive glass, but they just haven't been able to score enough on the offensive rebounds that they've ended up coming down with. So I think for them, it's more just about trying to find some more of those kind of spray out threes. I think some of the easiest ways to get in a rhythm from threes on second chances. And I think far too often the Wolves get a rebound and come down with it and put the ball low, where these Oklahoma City defenders are really good at just kind of attacking the ball and smacking it out of people's hands. And so I think the more that they can just catch it and kick it out, try to find open shooters and rhythm on second chances is something that will be important as well. Because I mean, for the Wolves, they started 5 of 11 from three, and the rest of the game they shot 6 of 28. So you really started to feel like, all right, we're generating a ton of open threes in the early part of this game. Have to feel good about our offensive process. A lot of the things that I listed with Ant being in the post, setting hammer screens, collapsing the backside of the defense with cuts, all those things were pretty good. Guys were driving the baseline really effectively after catching it in the corner as well to create even more open opportunities on the second side. So I think that all those things are important, but it does feel a little bit like last year's Western Conference Finals where, they had their chances and they just lost composure for 3 or 4 minute stretches, and boom, you're down 2-0. And then it's just hard to kind of recover from that. I guess the good news this year is that you're going home down 0-2 rather than going on the road down 0-2.
Yeah. Well said there. All right. One more segment left. The number one adjustment that needs to be made in game 3. I'll ask Jack that right after this. Quick reminder, today's episode also brought to us by BetterHelp. Your schedule gets packed, right? Work projects, kids, whatever it may be. It's so easy to let your priorities start to slip, even when we know what makes us happy. But when you feel like you got no time for yourself, the non-negotiables like therapy, they become more important than ever. If you've been thinking about starting therapy, it's time to give BetterHelp a try. Entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited for your schedule. So simple, too. All you got to do, you fill out a brief questionnaire, you get matched up with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Go visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon. You're getting 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockdown. All right, game 3 Saturday, 7:30 tip. We got a 2-game sample now, Jack. You're Chris Finch at practice in the film room tomorrow. What are you banging the table for? What's the message and the number one adjustment that needs to be made to climb out of this 2-0 hole that you find yourself in right now?
Yeah, obviously you can't necessarily control whether the shots are going in, but you can control how comfortable or uncomfortable you're making Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And I think the fact that he had 38 points tonight on 21 shots, he had 15 free throws. I thought, more of those free throws were just putting the Timberwolves in a compromised position and taking advantage of that rather than kind of grifting. I thought there were a lot more flopping and grifting plays in the first game than there were tonight. And I just think for Shai, he's just looked so much more comfortable than Ant has getting past the first line of the defense. And I think the way that the Wolves are consistently loading up to guys, the way that OKC is consistently loading up to Ant versus the way that the Wolves are guarding SGA in single coverage and in drop just, is not necessarily sustainable. I think that they have to throw more pressure at him. We saw that in the fourth quarter where the Timberwolves put Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Jaden McDaniels out there. And that's what they did in that win that they had right before the All-Star break where they played a 2-3 zone, but it was just more of those two guys just swarming SGA and making him uncomfortable and making him work. And that's what we saw Denver try to do as well. And I think the Wolves just have to do more of that. I think, when you look at SGA and Chet and Jalen Williams, those two guys had 48 points in this game tonight. And then, SGA had another 38. So that's 85 points. Mm-hmm. So all the others on Oklahoma City only had 33 points. I think that the Wolves are going to probably make those guys try to take more shots, right? I think the more that you're putting the ball in guys' hands that aren't SGA, I think that's probably the name of the game for the Timberwolves defense at this point. And if Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren beat you, then, I guess it's better than SGA beating you, but I think that they have to do everything they can on the defensive end to make those guys more uncomfortable. I think the 2-3 zone with those two guys just swarming him and forcing him to get rid of the ball is important because I just don't think that SGA is quite as impactful off the ball, obviously, as he is on the ball. So that's going to be an important one for me. And then, can the Timberwolves bench continue to outplay Oklahoma City? I mean, Oklahoma City really only played 2 guys off the bench, considerable minutes tonight in Case and Wallace and Alex Caruso. Those 2 guys shot a combined 3 of 9 from 3. And Isaiah Joe now kind of seems to be like he's on his way out of the rotation, as is Kenrich Williams, only played 1 minute tonight. And then Aaron Wiggins played 10 minutes tonight, but that was kind of just sparingly. So I just think that you got to force Oklahoma City's role players to make shots and then just kind of live with the results from there. Hope that, your role players then also start to make shots. But I think we're at a point now where you probably, if things continue to trend the way that they've been trending, I think the Timberwolves are going to have a really interesting offseason in front of them. In the case of, which role players do we want to try to keep around, which role players do we maybe say goodbye to? And then, also trying to weigh like, okay, how real were the first 2 rounds, given that, LA was, not a fully put together team yet with Luka and LeBron. And then the Warriors without Steph versus a team like Oklahoma City that is more the class of the conference and has a super bright future and has all these assets to play with. I just think it's going to be really interesting to see what Tim Connolly and his staff do in terms of kind of weighing, 2 series versus 1 potentially if they lose in this round. So just going to be really interesting to see how they respond in game 3, because I do think that the Wolves are talented enough.
Yeah.
And
we know they are. We've seen them beat everybody.
And have shown and have put together 4 really solid quarters against this team. Really 5 if you want to count this fourth quarter, tonight's fourth quarter. But man, they just, Oklahoma City is better than any team in the league, and a team, frankly, that I've seen since like the Steph and KD Warriors at just like taking moment, like lapses that you have, whether it's mentally, emotionally, physically, whatever the case may be, and just turning a 2 or 3 point game into a 9 or 10 point game in the blink of an eye, like a 7-0 run in 50 seconds or a 12-0 run in a minute and 45 seconds. It just completely changed the complexion of the game. It's kind of like a boss fight, right? You can do everything great for 85, 90%.
Got to play flawless,
but
you have to play flawless. Yeah,
exactly.
Yep. It's a shame. The only fun you and I have really had the last 50 hours is when we got to text back and forth after that Pacers-Knicks ending. Give me 30 seconds. Best game you've seen since blank, and just, I don't know, your favorite sequence of events. I mean, I'm still riding high after that. Just as an NBA fan, man, that game was incredible.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I think Tyrese Halliburton is the clutch stretch that he's on is crazy, and the Pacers now having 3 7-point comebacks in the final 45 seconds of a game is absolutely nuts. So it's kind of fun to just have on the off nights we have here of this series to be able to at least have some super entertaining basketball to watch without your team playing that isn't quite as stressful, I guess. But yeah, we'll hold off those comments that you just put up from Random Planet for another night. Hopefully the Wolves can turn it around and at least get 1 in game 3 to make game 4 a little bit more interesting.
Well said there. T-Wolves, again, still trying to figure out how to stop this OKC juggernaut, dig themselves in a 2-0 hole now, 103-118. That's your final tonight in game 2. As always, huge shout out to all you guys, though. All the everydayers out there that always make us your first listen. All you guys coming in the chat with us from game to game. Make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already. Go follow Jack at GRBorman13. Going to be live at the Target Center, I'm assuming, for games 3 and 4. Is that correct? Yep. Back at the Target Center. We'll catch you for game 3 again Saturday, another 7:30 p.m. tip. But until then, signing out.